Radio TV Phono Nut here, and I recently went to a private run estate sale where they were trying to clean out an old two-story house that a 90-something-year-old woman had lived in up until a couple of years ago when she passed away. And I found plenty of vintage televisions in that house, but unfortunately none of them were really in the best of shape. I brought home 4 of them, and I'm going to try to get the other ones if we can work something out. This one here is a KTV 12-inch black and white from 1985. This thing was in an upstairs part of the house that I don't think anybody had even been in ages. In fact, I think there were a couple of windows broken out and the birds had flown in there, and there was actually some bird poop on top of this TV when I found it. I've already cleaned it up a little bit. You should have seen it before I cleaned it up. But it does work. But the volume control is very scratchy, and all this here is condensation on the screen. I had it sitting out under my carport last night, and we got some rain, and it's very humid today, so that's why we have moisture build up. So I'm not going to plug this in right now, but we do need to take this apart and clean the tiner and the pots, and the yoke looks to be a little tilted, so we need to straighten that out. And then we ought to have us a decent little TV. I didn't even realize this cabinet was cracked right here. I just now noticed that. And here's the other little TV, a 12-inch GE black and white. I found this in a downstairs room. I was hoping it would be the vacuum tube version, but it's not. It's the solid state version. I don't know when it was made. The date sticker's faded, but it's going to be probably mid to late 70s. Pretty much the same story on this as the other one. Also in that upstairs part is this 19-inch Zenith Chromacolor 2. I think this is an earlier version from about 74 or so. It's in real crusty condition too, and you can tell by the wire around the volume knob this one's had a ton of use. And then the final set that I brought home is this 1972 Magnavox 19-inch color set. I believe this is a hybrid. I haven't pulled the back yet, but I could see through the vent openings, the power transformer, and I could see a big 72 date code stamped on it. When I found this had an early 90s 19-inch RCA XL100 sitting on top of it, so we can assume this TV probably hasn't worked in quite a long time. Now, the last one I had like this was about 30 years ago, and it had a toasted picture tube from the instant on killing it, and unfortunately the instant on switch on this set is engaged, so I won't be at all shocked if I find the tube is dead in this set. Now, this set here was something I picked up for $5 at the thrift store. It's a sharp 13-inch from 1994, and the reason I got it is because it has a little bit of sentimental meaning. Back around 95 or 6, I had a set just like this that I was trying to sell, and some very trashy, loudmouth women came over here to look at it, and they just kept trying to lowball me on the price and were being very pushy about it, like they were doing me a favor by making an offer at all on what I had to sell. Well, I finally got tired of them, and they left. And by this time I was good and ticked off. Though at the time my mother had a little 9-inch non-cable ready, non-remote control color set that I had put on the kitchen counter for her to watch. So I went in and was proceeding to disconnect the television. I was going to swap it out for the Sharp. She was on the phone with somebody, and she's like, wait a minute, let me see what he's doing. And she looked at me and said, what do you think you're doing? I said, I'm taking this TV out of here. And she said, if you think you're going to sell my TV, forget it. You can leave my TV alone. And I said, well, I'm going to replace it with one that's got a little bit bigger screen, it's got a remote control, and it's cable ready, so you can get more channels on it. And she said, well, okay, well then go ahead then. So she got back on the phone, and I swapped the TVs around, and by that time, she had gotten off the phone, and I handed her that remote control, and it didn't take her but about a minute to get used to that remote. She liked the fact that she could sit in her chair at the kitchen table and control the TV. Well, about 10 minutes later, the trash showed back up and decided they wanted the TV and would pay my price. I guess they figured out they couldn't get one at a pawn shop for $5. And I said, well, I'd like to help you, but I've already sold that TV. And she said, you couldn't have sold that TV. We were just here. You ain't had time to sell it. I said, yes, I did. I sold it to my mother. You sold a TV to your own mother? I said, yep. And she said, well, you tell your mother we want that TV and we want it right now. Well, my mother was at the kitchen door hearing all this, and when she heard that, she came out and said, you know, I was told how y'all acted over here, and that TV is mine, and you're not getting it for no amount of money, so you might as well just go on away from here. Well, that TV sat on the kitchen counter until she passed away in 2000, and then whenever my biological mother moved in with me, that little TV went to her bedroom, where it pretty much stayed on non-stop until about 2010. And by that time it was still working, but the tube was getting tired in it, and she just decided she was ready for a flat screen, so I got rid of the Sharp, and that was that. Well, whenever I was in the thrift store and saw this one, and I knew it was the exact same model of TV, I decided to go ahead and pick it up. Manufactured in May 1985. Yeah, I remember when Woolworth sold these sets in the mid to late 80s. I think they were $39.95, and you pretty much got a $39.95 TV, if you know what I mean. KTV was pretty much bottom of the barrel. Here's the inside, and as you can see, this thing is pretty crusty in here. But yeah, this set is so filthy and so much dirt in little hard to reach spaces. And the odor, just had to take it completely apart to clean it up thoroughly, which is something we rarely do, but this one needs to be thoroughly cleaned up. But as far as other sets in that house, there was the newer XL100 that I already mentioned. There was a 19-inch RCA XL100 up in the upstairs with a single knob Variactor tuner that had the tuner shaft broken off. Also upstairs was a circa 1955-56 21-inch RCA black and white big metal tabletop. And then downstairs there was a circa 76-77 Zenith Chromacolor 2 console. But if I can get back over there with a truck, I'm going to try to get all of those as well. Don't know what I'm going to do with them, but at least they'll be saved from going to the dump. Alright, we have the CRT cleaned up, and I also cleaned up the cabinet with the assistance of the high pressure from the water faucet, and then we dried the excess water off with a towel, and then used a hair dryer to dry the rest of it. I admit, with it being overcast, threatening rain, and humid, I probably should have picked another day to do this, like I waited until summertime, but we'll still get it accomplished anyway. And here's the cabinet. It's a lot cleaner than it was. It still has some imperfections, as in the plastic faded from UV exposure, especially on the top, and this crack right here. And there's some paint loss in here around the tuning knob. That's from human contact. But yeah, we got this looking pretty good now. Alright, tube is reinstalled, and the main thing you want to pay attention to on one of these is make sure your Aquadag grounding spring is attached properly. And on that one it was a little tarnished, so I used some fine grade sandpaper to polish it up a bit so it'd make better contact. And then of course this here connects to the tuner assembly, and that provides ground for your Aquadag. And if that Aquadag is not grounded properly, that can cause a variety of weird problems, including the CRT building up a charge and arcing and cremating sensitive solid state components on the chassis. But basically this Aquadag coating on here, think of it as a giant capacitor. That's what's used for your high voltage filter capacitor, and of course a capacitor does have to be grounded, so there you go. Now this tube is made by Samsung, but I don't think the rest of the chassis is. I think the chassis itself is actually a KTV product. Alright, I just gave this chassis the high pressure water treatment, being careful to try to not get any water in the tuner or the power transformer, which was a real trip trying to hold all that out of the way, and hose this chassis down at the same time. And we're going to do just like we did with the cabinet. We're going to use a towel to sop up all the excess water, and then we will take our hair dryer and dry it up the rest of the way. And we have to make sure this is 110% dry before we apply power to this. Alright, getting ready to clean this tuner. I've already cleaned the volume pot and the potentiometers on the rear of the circuit board. This doesn't have a conventional pop-off cover like most do. To get all this apart would be a major pain in the butt, so I just pried it open enough to get some cleaner down in there, and then when we're done we'll snap it back into position and it should be okay. So yeah, I first sprayed a little CRC in the tuner, and then we're turning it back and forth about a G times. Then I'm going to spray some little bit of Neutral on the contacts and then run it back and forth a G times, and that should take care of it. Now I will tell you, the tuners were very cheaply made in these sets, and consequently were always a weak spot, especially with intermittent contacts and such. In fact, I've got a little Gold Star built GE set here that the tuner was so jacked up in that I just ended up converting it to a monitor with AV input jacks on it, and you'll see that video one day before long. Well, I did something a little unconventional and a bit sloppy looking, but trying to get this to fit back on here like it came off was proving to be most difficult, so I just bent it back where it would snap on here, and then I soldered it in place right here. So if anybody ever needs to get this off, all they have to do is heat up this solder right here and pop it off, and then they can get to the contacts if ever need be again. Alright, we're ready to dry this even more thoroughly, and then we're going to put it back together and see if it works or blows up. Alright, we're back together. Let's see if it goes or blows. Well, it goes, and we have a raster. We have snow on the screen. Now we need to feed it a signal and adjust our geometry. That power transformer sure got a heck of a buzz. But at least one thing about this set, if the tuner ever goes wonky, it'll be real easy to put AV input jacks on this, because we already have an isolation transformer in place. The GE that you'll see the video on soon, it did not have an isolation transformer, so I had to add one. Yeah, this is one of those sets that the antenna terminals remain on the back of the television, and on such sets you want to be careful because some of them have the tuner isolation network on the back of the set, but on this one the tuner isolation is on the tuner itself, so no dangers of blowing up anything here. So this is one of the things I miss about analog. Back in the analog days, you could turn the TV on and generally pick up enough of a signal off of the twin lead here to know if you were in business or not. But now that everything's digital, we have to have all this jake leg crap to feed a signal into the television, so let's see what happens.
And it spoke to the kind of person that she was, and she was really very much a role model.
And there we are.
Women, and particularly
my grandbaby.
Yeah, today's our dose of sleazeball programming. Yeah, for a cheap television, it's got a decent picture, but I need to tilt the yoke a little bit and maybe do a little height, vertical size adjustment, and I think we can put this joker back together.
Scattered, backed up by incredible service.
Alright,
that wouldn't mean much.
Got it adjusted, looking pretty good, so we're going to let it run a while, and if there are no problems,
But guess what?
we'll put the back on it, and this will be done. And for a cheapo black and white, this has a pretty decent picture.
But if you want to keep the phone and number you already got.
Alright, we're getting ready to put this back together. It seems to be working fine. Now, I was thinking about the later 12-inch black and white TVs that I know were made up until at least 1998, because I have one, and the same form factor was pretty much the same for the later sets as it was these. I guess by the mid to late 80s they had settled on a design and pretty much used that design until the end, except the later 12-inch black and white sets, instead of having an internal power transformer, they ran off of a wall wart. In fact, this set here has a space on the circuit board where a DC input jack could be added, as in if you wanted to use this in your car or whatever. As far as later sets, I remember in the early 2000s, I was friends with some guys at the local community college, and I'd go up there and visit them sometimes at the apartments up there, and there was an exchange student from South Africa who was what you'd call a brainiac, and he often tutored one of my friends, and I don't remember what it was, but anyways, everybody was getting ready to graduate. This exchange student told me, he said, "I hear you like old TVs." I said, "Yeah," and he said, "Well, I got one you can have if you want it." And he brought me one of those little black-cased 12-inch black and white sets. I don't remember exactly when it was made, but it wasn't that old, and it ran off of a 12-volt wall wart, or in that case, I think you'd call it a brick. The brand of it was Action, and I remember them selling those at Walmart for $39.95, and he said, "I'm fixing to graduate, I'm going back home, and I won't have any need for this TV anymore." I feel like it's something he probably either picked up at a yard sale while he was here, he might have bought it new, I don't know. But the funny thing is, even at that time, most college students, they wouldn't have been caught dead with a black and white TV in their dorm room, but this exchange student from South Africa, he had more on his mind than watching television. He was there to get an education. He wasn't there worried about a TV. So for him, I'm sure that little 12-inch black and white set served his purpose just fine. Alright, here we are back together again. Man, that transformer's got a loud buzz to it. But just to recap, basically all we had to do with this was clean out all the crud and clean the tuners and the potentiometers, and that got us back in business. No apparent component failures noted at this time. So, like I said earlier, for a cheapo television that probably cost $39.95, it's okay. It's a decent little set. There was an elderly couple that I knew growing up. They had a little bit newer version of this KTV on their kitchen counter, and I think they ran it all the time. That set, as I recall, the front of it was black, and the cabinet itself was white. This one's kind of a beige color. It's, like I said, the top's a little faded from UV exposure. And I'm going to tell you, they literally wore that television out. I serviced it a time or two for them, and it just got so that when they got rid of it, and I gave them a little 13-inch color set, there just really wasn't no hope for the little KTV. The tuner was worn out, the volume control was worn out. You could spray it, and it was still scratchy. Picture tube was soft in it, and I think it stayed around here for a while, and then I ended up just throwing it away. This one here, I looked at the CRT neck, and it doesn't appear to have that bluish look to the electron gun, so I'm going to say this one probably hasn't had a ton of hours on it. It was probably used very infrequently and then just stuck up on the top floor of that house and left to rot. But we cleaned it up and brought it back, and it's presentable looking now. It's not perfect cosmetically, but it's a whole lot better than it was.
8465. That's 1-800-465-8465.
This is an important message for anyone and everyone with Medicare. If Medicare is important to you, then you need to hear this message, as Medicare plans can change it. And right now is help relieve bathroom urgency.
Yeah, commercials these days consist of Medicare supplement plans and ambulance chaser lawyers. That's about the extent of it.
Incredible sauces here.
And they get very nerve-wracking.
All urine away, helping to keep skin dry and control.
I was hoping we could get down with Rebelza, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that this time. So maybe next time. All right, that's about all I've got for this. Hope you enjoyed it, and more to come later. All right, I peeked in this Zenith. This is a first-generation solid-state Chromacolor 2 19-inch. It uses a 19 EC45 chassis. It's a vertical chassis that folds down for service. This was the date code on the power transformer is the 51st week of 73, so this set was probably made in early 74, and this was Zenith's first 19-inch, and it was also used in 17-inch too. Solid state color chassis. They did have an older solid state chassis that was used in the 25-inch sets, but as far as 17 and 19-inch portables, this was the first solid state. Zenith was a little bit later to the solid state party than everybody else was. In fact, when this was made, they were still making the 19-inch 4-tube hybrid sets, and that's really what I would have rather this had been, really. But one day one will turn up. But anyway, I pulled the back off, and I can tell that the tripler has been replaced, as well as the horizontal output transistor. I have not fired this up yet, and I'm not going to fire it up right now. It's too damp and humid out here, and this thing is very crusty on the inside. I did knock off some of the superficial crap from the outside, but I don't need no light show here, so this may end up waiting till summertime for me to tackle it. But yeah, the tripler has been replaced, and the horizontal output transistor has been replaced, and I can see on the chassis where the old tripler arced out and arced over to the chassis, which was a common problem on these Zenith sets. In the 90s, I got a lot of Zenith TVs that way, because when the tripler arced and scared the daylights out of the lady of the house, she didn't want no part of the TV anymore, so I'd wind up with it. Now, as far as the safety capacitor in this television, those of you who were around back then know the fiasco that Zenith had with safety capacitors, where the capacitor would open up and cause the high voltage to skyrocket and blow the neck off of the picture tube, as well as cause other damage. But Zenith did stand behind those sets for years. This one here is an early version that has, I think, 4 individual white tubular ceramic capacitors on the flyback, and then I think there's another one down on the bottom portion of the chassis. and then they went to a single white ceramic tubular 4-lead capacitor. That's the one that the end liked to blow out of and cause the high voltage to skyrocket. Now the theory was if the capacitor blew open, the connection would break at the 2 leads on the end and open the circuit, but it didn't work that way. The capacitor opened, but the link at the end that blew out did not open up, so that caused the high voltage to still be present and blow up stuff. And then they upgraded to a Sprague orange 4-lead capacitor. Now that one didn't really give any trouble, except on a few occasions you might run into a shorted one. But in that case, all that would do is just trip the circuit breaker on the back of the set. So usually what happened with these, like this set with the individual ceramic tubular capacitors, is one capacitor would quietly open up at a time, and when each capacitor opened, the high voltage would creep up a little more, and then when too many of them opened up, that's when the high voltage would get too high and blow up stuff. So if we end up saving this set, we'll end up changing those white capacitors to something more modern. Here's the inside of that Magnavox. As expected, pretty crusty inside. This is basically just a console chassis that they have in a 19-inch portable. So at the same time, they also had a hybrid chassis that was used in some of the lower tier models, and I think that one was series string. This one here is the better of the two. Alright, I'm almost afraid to do this out of fear of what I'm going to find. Do we have any HK shorts? No, we do not. Do we have any G1 short? No, we do not. Alright, now let's test for cutoff. Red gun. Supposed to go up, I think, 2 divisions. Yeah, we have red cutoff. That's good. Now, what about our blue? This meter is kind of hard to see. Alright, now green. Okay, we got green cut off. Now let's look at quality. Red is barely in the green, blue is barely in the green, and green is a little bit higher. Well, at least they're all sort of evened out. This set will probably make a somewhat okay picture, but this tube is a little bit on the tired side, but it could be a lot worse, like the one I had 30 years ago that was so bad that even with a brightener on it, you could just barely see the picture. Alright, I've just got it on heater mode. We're just going to let it cook for about 5 or 10 minutes, because this tube probably hadn't seen the light of day in 30 years, so we're just going to see if it'll come up any on its own. Alright, they did go up, and I had to readjust the cutoff. So that's the red, that's the blue, and that's the green. So let's see about emission now. Alright, red, low end of the good as before, blue, same, green, a little bit better. Not a great tube, but certainly could be a lot worse. Let me bump it down to 5 volts and see what happens. Now, like new tube would read up in the upper portion of the green scale, and you would still get a good reading at 5 volts. I don't imagine we're going to get that here. Alright, cut off. Yeah, see, I'm having to readjust my cutoff here. Alright, quality. Red, upper end of the bad for the blue, lower end of the green on the good on the green. So, yeah. Usable tube could be better, could be a lot worse. At least we have something to work with.
Returned to New York after becoming just the third member of Congress to be expelled since the Civil War. Santos's congressional seat will be filled following the special election. With 311 yeas to just 114 nays.